Hi everyone, welcome to my magical inkery tour. My name is Catherine and today I'm going to show you how I created these two cards using the April embossing folder from Lisa Horton Crafts, A Year in Bloom. We'll be using the April folder, which is the Tulip folder, and let me show you what you'll need to recreate these projects. So for starters, we'll be using the embossing folder from the Year in Bloom. I also have a Tim Holtz die from my collection, and I'll just be using the plaid background on my project. I have two mini blending pens that I use with my Cloud9 Lisa Horton inks. I'll be using Sugar Candy, Strawberry Sundae, and Garden Sage, but of course you can use your favorite colors. Pink Tulips just happen to be my favorite. I'll also be showing you how I watercolored with some Distress Oxide, so I'm using the Mode Lawn, Saltwater Taffy, Seedless Preserves, and Squeezed Lemonade. For my sentiments, I'll be stamping them in my VersaFine Clair Nocturne ink. And in addition to these blending pens, you'll want a blending brush for your background. I used a watercolor blending pen. You can find these anywhere, but if you need one, I'm sure you can contact Tanya and she will help you with that. And I also have a Wink of Stella pen to paint over the tulips on this particular card. Now I didn't use it on the other one, but if you really like the shimmery look, I'm sure it will also look beautiful on this. As far as the card dimensions, I'll put those in the description box below the video. All right, let me pull all this together and we'll get started. The first step in my project today is to center the rectangular die on my cardstock. So I just find that if I cut that out before I emboss it, I don't lose any of the detail from those embossing folders. So I'm just going to tape it down using some Post-it tape because that comes off really nicely. And I'm going to bring in my Big Shot machine. Now, when you're using a Big Shot and a 3D die, you're only going to need well, I have a magnetic plate, but you'll need your base plate and only one of your cutting plates. But we don't have the folder yet, so I'm going to make my sandwich using both cutting plates just to cut out the rectangle in the center of my cardstock. So I'm going to run that through. So my rectangle is cut out of my cardstock, and I'm only going to be using the center piece, but you know, while I'm running it through the machine, I might as well run the outside piece through also, and then I can use that for an extra card another day. So I'm going to just take my die off of that and bring in my folder and my cutting plates. Now, when you're using these detailed embossing folders, you'll find that if you're running it through a Big Shot, you are only going to need one of your cutting plates and your platform. So I'm going to just go ahead and center both pieces in my folder. And you just want to keep in mind that the part of your folder that has the printing on it is going to be the upside of your card or the part of the card that's going to pop up. Now, to make my sandwich, like I said, all I'm going to do is just use my platform and one cutting plate, and I'll run that through my Big Shot. So let's open it up and see what we've got. And there we have our frame that's embossed with our tulips popping right up, and I'm going to put that aside for a different project. And we're going to use this piece to create our card today. In order to paint with my Distress Oxides, I like to just use an ink block to smush my ink onto. And then of course you'll want some water and some paper towels just to help you work with your watercolor brush. So I'm going to start with my lightest color. That's just how I like to work. And I'm going to make a few of the tulips just a yellow. I just think they came out really beautiful with all these different colors. I'm going to just smush it onto my block and add a little water to that just to get it going. Make sure we're not too wet, and just paint in those tulips. I forgot to hit the record button when I was working on the leaves, but you can see that I have completed the leaves and my tulips. They're all painted in with my Distress Oxides. So the next step is to come back with my Wink of Stella, and I'm just going to go over the blossoms and not the leaves with that. So you just want to really give it a good shake to get all that mica that's in the paint mixed together. And here we go. My tulip centerpiece is completed. I have painted in the blossoms as well as the leaves and greenery using my Distress Oxides inks. And then I went over the blossoms using a clear Wink of Stella. Now I squeezed it a little hard, and so I got lots of extra shimmer. So if that happens to you, all you have to do is just mop up the excess with your paper towel. At this point, we're going to use a Tim Holtz stencil from the Stampers Anonymous collection. And I'm going to add just a little bit of plaid to the corners of my background. So I'll just do that using a plain old blending brush. Whichever blending brushes you like to use will work. It doesn't have to be anything special. Just pick up a little bit of that Distress Oxide. Once again, in the Mowed Lawn, which is the same color that we used for the leaves and stems on our tulips. And we'll just come in and add just a touch of that. If you're holding it down really well, you can just lift it up to see how dark you've got it and to know if you want to add a little more or if you're happy with how it looks. Now I'm ready to assemble my first card. So I'm going to use some foam dimensional tape just to pop this center panel off the top of my background. Next, I use my glue just to go around the outside edge of my card and add a bead of glue. And I have a little bin full of some bits and pieces that I've been using to work on my spring cards. So I already have a greeting ready to go that says, "Wishing you a sweet and happy Easter." And we're going to pop that up right on the side and call this card complete. In order to do that, I'm going to use another piece of my foam tape just to give it a little raise. All right, there we are. Card number 1 is complete. Let's move on to the second card. In order to create this second card today, I'll be using my mini blending brushes directly from my Cloud9 ink pads, and I'll be painting them into the top part of our embossing folder, and then we'll run the cardstock through. Remember, the top is the part with the print on the folder. And we'll get started. right, now that I have finished coloring in the leaves, and it looks like I missed a little spot up here, I'm going to come back with a cotton swab and that I've dipped in water and just clean up around the edges to get a nice clean look on my finished card. Okay, so by putting a piece of cardstock underneath my folder, I can really get a sense of where the different parts of my flower and leaves are, and it will just help with a cleaner, crisper finish. Once we're done running our embossing folder through the die cut machine, we can always come back and add a little bit of ink if we've taken it off anywhere where we did want it to stay. So at this point, I'm going to come back in and I'm going to go back and forth between my strawberry sundae and my sugar candy and just color in those blossoms. Before I put my cardstock inside of my folder, I am going to give it a little spritz with water using a distress sprayer just to freshen up any of that ink that might have started to dry a little bit, and it will also give our card more of a watercolor look. So we really just need one little spritz in there. And that's centered. So just remember that when you're putting your embossing folder through a regular Sizzix machine, such as the one that I have, we only want to use one cutting plate because the folder itself is very thick. And there is our card, and I think I'm going to just give it another spritz and try to get a little more of that color onto my cardstock. Good. And we'll run it through one more time. And I'm pretty happy with how that turned out. I actually like the brighter pink more than I do my original. But let's get it all put together and we're going to wrap up these projects. In order to finish my card today, I'm going to show you how I create a faux bow using twine and some dimensional tape. So the first thing I'm going to do is just add a little bit to the back. And I think I'm going to do a double line, so just one near the top and one near the bottom. Now, I created this label using a die that I have from my stash, but of course, if you don't have this die, you can always use a paper trimmer and some scrap paper to do this as well. And then all you're going to do is wrap your twine back and forth so that from the front it looks like you've tied a bow underneath your sentiment, just like that. And then we'll just put it on our card. And I'll trim the edges. And there we have it. Our card is finished. I do have one tip that I wanted to share with you. If you're using a twine such as I have here, where it's on a piece of cardboard, when I unwind it, I have lots of little folds in it. If you just give it a spritz with your mister and then pull it straight, that will iron out all of those little folds in your twine, and you get a nice straight piece of twine that does exactly what you want it to do. So here we have it, our two cards that we created together using one folder from Lisa Horton's Year in Bloom. And I want to thank you for joining me today. And if you have any questions, feel free to leave comments in the bottom and I will do my best to answer them. I'll also put a link to my Magical Inquiry Tours Facebook page at the bottom of this video so that you can follow along on Facebook. If you decide to try this yourself, please share pictures. Have a great day.